The sky above the valley was bruised with storm clouds, the kind that rolled in like slow black waves. High in the misted ridges, the wind carried the faint whine of engines, deep, resonant, and alien. Sergeant Elias Kane lay still in the mud, his cheek pressed to the damp earth, the smell of wet soil thick in his nose. Through the glass of his scope, the horizon shimmered under the distortion of heat exhaust from the descending craft. They came in perfect formation, their massive hulls catching stray flashes of lightning. Each vessel bore the insignia of the Galactic Armies, gleaming sigils that looked like interlocking blades, meant to remind the conquered of their futility. They had landed before, across other worlds, other skies, always with the same certainty, that they were untouchable, inevitable. Kane's rifle rested in the crook of his shoulder, the barrel draped with torn and frayed strips of burlap and synthetic thread, mottled with mud until it looked like part of the valley floor. His ghillie suit clung to him like a second skin, every inch coated in filth. The aliens would call it primitive. He had heard them on intercepted comms before, their language harsh, almost metallic. They mocked human camouflage, likening it to draping rags over fear. That was fine. Let them laugh. Below him, in a wide basin carved by centuries of glacial runoff, alien landing craft settled into the muck. Hydraulic legs sank deep into the softened ground, stabilizing against the wind. Hundreds of soldiers poured out in disciplined lines, each one encased in segmented armor that reflected the dull gray light. They moved with machine precision, rifles slung across their backs, sensor arrays sweeping the terrain. To the untrained eye, it was an impenetrable force, unmatched numbers, unmatched technology. To Kane, it was a pattern, and patterns could be broken. His earpiece crackled with static before a clipped voice broke through. Command a long shot, 1, confirm eyes on target. He recognized the voice, Captain Dre, the field controller coordinating the last few sniper teams embedded in the Valley network. Eyes on, Kane murmured, lips barely moving. Multiple platoons disembarking. Heavy equipment incoming. There was a pause, then hold fire until directive. We want their forward command identified before engagement. Copy. He let the channel fall silent again. His spotter, Corporal Juno Vance, lay a meter to his left, half buried in the same mud-slicked embankment. She had the smaller optic, scanning and tagging positions on her slate. Her breath came slow and steady. The only movement in her was the occasional flick of her fingers over the device. She was younger than Kane by nearly a decade, but she'd already learned the first rule of survival in their line of work. Stillness was a weapon. Commanders will be in that cluster, she whispered, nodding toward a group of aliens disembarking from a taller, more heavily armored craft. Their armor gleamed silver instead of gray, their rifles heavier, the insignias on their chest plates edged in crimson. Two of them gestured toward a portable command hub being deployed on the muddy plain. Around them, soldiers fanned out in an outward arc, forming a perimeter. Kane studied them through his scope. The faces were insectal, plated with bony ridges and narrow eyes that flickered with pale light. Their mouths were concealed behind breathing masks that hummed faintly, like the buzz of trapped wasps. They stood taller than any human, broad across the shoulders, yet there was something in their posture, an arrogance in the way they didn't bother scanning the hillsides. Overconfidence'll get you killed, Kane murmured to himself. Vance smirked faintly. Think they've even seen a ghillie suit before? Not one that mattered, Kane said. A low rumble echoed across the valley as more troop carriers touched down. The mud churned under their landing struts, sending brown water spraying in arcs. From above, this place would look like a hornet's nest being built in real time. Walls of armor and firepower forming without pause. Yet Kane saw the blind spots. Between the carriers, in the shadow of the larger equipment haulers, there were gaps in coverage. Human eyes, human patience could find them. That was why he was here. A lifetime ago, before the first alien transmissions, before the world governments collapsed into emergency coalitions, Kane had been nothing more than a small-town kid with a hunting rifle. Now, He was the last word in problems that couldn't be solved with sheer numbers. A sniper was less about the trigger pull and more about the weight. The alien armies might own the sky, but on the ground, in the folds of the land, they didn't own time. Hours passed with the slow inevitability of dripping water. The alien soldiers established their base with clinical efficiency, ignoring the mountainsides as if they were part of the scenery. Patrols swept the basin floor, but never strayed far uphill. Vance chewed on a rationed strip in silence, offering one to Kane, who shook his head. He preferred an empty stomach before a shot. Every sensation was sharper that way. The rain began as a fine mist, beating on the exposed metal of the rifle. It blurred the valley in Kane's scope, turning armored soldiers into shifting shadows. The aliens didn't slow their work. Their armor was built for worse. But the rain was a gift, sound softened, vision narrowed, heat signatures muddied. Kane adjusted his breathing, matching it to the rhythm of the rainfall. The comm in his ear crackled again. Long shot 1 standby. Command element confirmed on site. Mark for fire. Kane didn't reply immediately. He watched the alien commander, a taller figure with elaborate crimson patterns etched into his armor, step out from the command hub. The alien's helmet swept left and right, surveying the basin like a king admiring new territory. Kane tracked him through the scope, noting every movement, every guard rotation. Target acquired, Kane said at last. Do not engage, Dre ordered. We need intel on their defensive protocols first. Maintain visual. Kane let out a slow breath. Orders were orders. But watching the commander laugh, a sharp, grating sound that carried even through the rain, twisted something in his gut. The alien pointed toward a group of captured human equipment hauled in by their troops. A battered ghillie suit was held up for display, dangling from a metal rod like a dead animal. The alien commander said something to his officers, and they laughed with him, the sound echoing against the valley walls. The translator in Kane's ear caught the phrase, the rags of ghosts. Vance's jaw tightened. They're making a show of it. They'll regret it, Kane said. The rain thickened, drumming against the rocks. Kane's gloved hand adjusted the focus of his scope, drawing the commander's helmet into razor clarity. He could see the faint pulse of the alien's breathing apparatus, the flicker of light in its eyes. One shot would end him, but command's order held. Kane forced himself to settle, to be stone again. The war wasn't won by impulse. Still, the image stayed with him, the alien holding that shredded camouflage aloft, laughing at what they didn't understand. Primitive, they thought. Worthless. The suit on Kane's back was the same, torn, frayed, and coated in the muck of the valley floor. It was also the reason no scanner could find him, no drone could track his movements. Every inch of it told a story, and by the time the aliens learned to read it, it would be too late. By nightfall, the basin glowed with alien light. Portable towers cast cones of white and blue across the mud, slicing through the mist. Kane and Vance remained in the dark, their forms swallowed by the hillside. They spoke little, conserving energy, letting the hours stretch. Kane's mind mapped the patrol routes, the tower rotations, the shifting positions of the alien officers. Every piece was a thread in a net he would pull tight later. In the deep hours, when the rain slowed and the valley settled into the uneasy stillness of an occupied zone, Kane allowed himself one glance toward Vance. Her eyes were half-lidded, but her hands never left her slate. They were ready. Tomorrow, Kane whispered, so low it was almost lost to the night. They'll see what the rags can do. Far below, the alien commander laughed again, oblivious to the eyes watching from the dark. The sound rose into the mist, and for Kane, it was the promise of the work ahead. Rain still clung to the valley like a shroud when dawn bled into the sky. The alien base below had transformed overnight. New barricades, sentry drones gliding in lazy arcs above the perimeter, and thick cables running from the command hub to the weapons platforms. The Galactic Armies moved with the same relentless order, their armor gleaming in the weak daylight, their every motion rehearsed and precise. Yet their discipline had edges Kane could see fraying. Even from this distance, he caught the slight hesitations of soldiers scanning the hillsides, the extra moments spent glancing into the mist. The unknown gnawed at them. Kane shifted his weight in the mud, keeping his movements deliberate and slow. Every joint in his body felt locked in place after the long night, but stiffness was an old enemy and easily ignored. His rifle lay before him, scope lens dimmed with a filter to avoid catching stray light. Beside him, Vance adjusted her slate, the soft glow hidden beneath a scrap of cloth. She had already mapped the morning patrols and marked two patterns that broke the perfect symmetry of the alien movements. "They're replacing the northern sentry every 22 minutes, she murmured. Gaps about 30 seconds before the replacement locks in. Kane's eyes didn't leave his scope. And the western side, blind spot between the towers. Fog rolls in heavier there. They're extending the sweep, but the sensors lag. Information was ammunition, and Vance had learned to collect it with the same precision Kane reserved for his shots. They had no luxury for wasted words. The alien commander from the day before emerged from the command hub again, flanked by officers in silvered armor. They moved toward a formation of soldiers assembled in tight ranks. The commander's voice carried over the comm intercept, the translator giving Kane the clipped interpretation. "Our enemies cling to dirt and shadows. They will be found, and they will be erased." Laughter followed, not as loud as yesterday, but still certain. Kane let the words slide past him. Words weren't the battlefield. Distance, timing, and patience were. He shifted his scope toward the western blind spot Vance had noted. A small patrol moved through, 3 soldiers in matte gray armor, scanning with shoulder-mounted lights. They walked with the same carelessness as those who believed technology answered every question. "Patrol west," Vance whispered. Kane made no sound. He tracked their movement until they passed between 2 jagged boulders at the edge of the valley floor. The fog swallowed them for an instant. His crosshairs settled on the gap between the leader's helmet and shoulder plate. Breath slowed, heart steady, pressure on the trigger. The rifle cracked, a sharp, clean sound that vanished almost instantly into the rolling echo of the valley walls. Through the scope, Kane watched the alien drop without a sound. Armor splintered where the round found its way in. The 2 others froze, heads snapping toward the sound's origin, rifles raised. They fired into the fog, plasma bolts searing the air. Kane shifted slightly, chambering the next round, and caught the second soldier as he turned toward the fallen comrade. Another precise strike, another body down. The third broke into a sprint for cover, his armor plates glinting faintly. Kane led him by a fraction and sent the shot. The soldier pitched forward, motionless. Vance was already marking the fallen positions. 3 down, no alarm yet. Too far from the center to be noticed right away, Kane said. Their sensors will read it as a comm dropout for a few seconds. Below, the patrol routes began to shift. Kane could see figures moving to investigate, but without a clear understanding of where the threat came from, they spread thin. A pair of drones lifted from the base, humming as they scanned the air. Their optics flared red as they passed overhead, but Kane lay utterly still, mud cooling his skin beneath the suit. The drones moved on, returning to their original patterns. The rain began again, thicker now, turning the basin into a churned expanse of dark water and clay. Alien boots sank deeper with every step, slowing their response. Kane and Vance used the cover to reposition slightly along the hillside, angling for a better view of the command hub. Every inch mattered. Visibility, line of sight, and the subtle shift in elevation that might mask their movement. When the alien commander reappeared, his stride was sharper, less measured than before. He spoke rapidly to his officers, and the translator caught fragments about unseen strikes and ground ghosts. The laughter was gone. Getting under his skin, Vance muttered. Kane didn't answer. His attention was on a new figure stepping out behind the commander. Taller, leaner, armor patterned with darker shades meant for concealment. This one moved differently, scanning with deliberate slowness, pausing often. An alien tracker, perhaps, or their equivalent of a marksman. Kane watched the way the figure's head tilted toward the hills, the long rifle slung across its back. The alien marksman gestured toward the western ridgeline. Their ridge, and two squads began moving in that direction. "They're coming for us," Vance said, eyes narrowing. "Let them," Kane replied. The squads advanced cautiously, leapfrogging between cover. Kane let them get halfway up the slope before he moved. His first shot took the lead soldier of the left squad. The second cut down the right squad's point man. Confusion rippled instantly. They dropped low, returning fire at random. Plasma bolts scorched rock and dirt, the air filling with the smell of burned earth. Kane shifted again, each movement a calculated fraction, and began dismantling them one by one. Vance fed in positions without pause, her voice steady, unshaken. The alien marksman didn't fire immediately. Instead, he crouched low, eyes fixed on the hillside where Kane had last been. Kane could feel the attention, a pressure like the heat before lightning. He adjusted, letting the rain mask his movement, and sighted in on the marksman. The alien shifted as though sensing the aim, but hesitation cost him. Kane's round struck just above the chest plate, the force dropping him backward into the mud. For a heartbeat, the valley was still except for the rain. Then alien shouts rose, sharper and more urgent than before. The remaining soldiers pulled back, dragging their wounded. The squads vanished into the fog, leaving the slope empty again. Vance exhaled slowly. "That'll make the report." Kane's expression didn't change. "Won't be the last they send." Below, the commander stood rigid, staring toward the hills. Even from this distance, the tension in his posture was clear. He barked orders, and more drones lifted into the air, their search patterns doubling in intensity. Towers swiveled, sweeping the slopes with blinding light. But Kane and Vance were gone from that position, sliding quietly to a new vantage point deeper along the ridge. They settled in silence, the sound of the rain swallowing all else. Kane's mind traced the likely paths the aliens would take now. More trackers, more concentrated sweeps, perhaps artillery fire meant to flush them out. All of it would cost them time, energy, and trust in their own invulnerability. That trust was already cracking. Vance wiped water from her optic. "You think they'll change their approach?" "They'll try," Kane said. "Doesn't matter. Every time they look for us, they're not looking somewhere else." She nodded, understanding. The sniper's war was never about winning outright. It was about shaping the battlefield, bleeding the enemy's confidence until they made mistakes too big to recover from. Far below, the alien commander disappeared back into the command hub. The lights of the base glowed through the mist, cold and unwavering. Kane adjusted his rifle, settling into the earth once more. The rain showed no sign of stopping. Neither did he. The fog that had sheltered them for 2 days began to thin, unraveling in pale threads over the valley. Below, the alien base had grown into a fortress, its outer barricades fortified with energy fields that shimmered faintly in the morning light. Watchtowers rose higher, their rotating optics sweeping in tighter intervals. Drones now moved in trios instead of pairs, their search beams cutting through the mist like blades. Every adjustment spoke of a commander rattled, but also adapting. Kane knew the balance could tip either way. He lay prone in a new position along a spine of rock that jutted from the slope like the back of some buried creature. His ghillie suit blended perfectly into the weathered stone and tufts of mountain grass. Vance was 5 meters to his right, her profile almost invisible against the ridge, eyes fixed on her slate. She had spent the night tracking every new movement in the basin, building a map that pulsed with alien patrol routes and drone circuits. "They're doubling their tracker units," she said quietly, spreading them in an outward fan. "If they keep the pace, they'll cover the northern hills in 4 hours." Kane adjusted the angle of his scope, studying a pair of aliens moving at the edge of the base. These weren't standard infantry. Their armor was slimmer, with matte black plates designed to swallow light, and they carried elongated rifles Kane recognized as high-velocity kinetic weapons, the kind you issued to those who hunted other marksmen. "Not 4 hours," he said. "They'll make contact sooner." She glanced at him. "Then we move." He shook his head. "We make them commit." Every step they take uphill is a step they can't take back without looking weak. The wind shifted, carrying the faint hum of alien calms. Kane couldn't understand the words without the translator feed, but the cadence was enough. Short bursts, clipped orders, an urgency they hadn't shown before. Through his scope, he tracked the black-armored pair as they separated, one angling toward the western rise, the other threading through the low ground toward their current position. Kane let his breathing slow, counting the seconds between each movement. The alien in the low ground paused near a rock outcropping, scanning with a device that pulsed faint blue light. The sweep passed within meters of Kane's position before sliding past. Technology, for all its precision, still struggled with nature's chaos. The alien shifted again, and in that fraction of hesitation, Kane took the shot. The round punched through the narrow seam beneath the helmet's ridge, the body collapsing silently into the wet earth. Vance was already tracking the second hunter. He had stopped abruptly, head tilting as though sensing the shot's echo. He crouched low, scanning the ridge, rifle rising. Kane adjusted by a hair, accounting for the slope's drop and the faint crosswind. The second round hit just as the alien pulled his trigger, the plasma bolt searing harmlessly into stone a meter from Kane's head. Vance exhaled. "That's 2 less trackers." "They'll send more," Kane replied. The alien commander reacted faster this time. Patrols shifted immediately, drones swarming the area where the hunters had fallen. Searchlights cut swaths through the rain, bright and unyielding. Kane and Vance were already moving, low and silent, slipping deeper into the ridge network. Their new position overlooked a narrow ravine where runoff from the slopes collected into a sluggish stream. Kane had chosen it days ago as a natural choke point. Steep sides, limited cover, perfect for forcing an enemy into a line of fire. They waited. An hour passed. The rain eased, and with it came the faint sound of movement in the ravine. Alien boots clanged against stone, followed by the low hum of drone wings. Kane peered through the scope and saw them. A squad of 8, advancing in pairs, rifles sweeping. They moved cautiously, clearly expecting contact. Kane let the first pair pass beneath his position before firing. The shot struck the trailing soldier in the neck joint, the forward one spinning toward the sound. Vance took the second with a clean shot through the visor. The remaining 6 scattered for cover, firing into the slopes. Kane shifted positions without pause, forcing them to fire at where he had been instead of where he was. Another shot, another soldier down. The ravine became a trap. The aliens tried to push forward, but were funneled into the open by the steep rock faces. Vance's fire caught 2 more as they broke from cover. The last pair retreated, firing suppressive bursts that scorched the stone but hit nothing living. Kane didn't pursue. The retreat was the point. He wanted them to report back that the hills weren't just occupied. They were haunted. From a basin, alarms began to sound. The drones regrouped in a tight formation, fanning out in a sweeping arc toward the ravine. Kane and Vance melted back into the hillside, moving toward an overhang they had marked as a fallback position. The ledge provided cover from above and a concealed path to the next ridge. As they settled, Vance wiped rain from her optics. "They're bleeding resources chasing us." "That's the plan," Kane said. She studied him for a moment. "And when they stop chasing, then we choose where they go next." The words were calm, but Kane felt the weight behind them. Every engagement so far had been on his terms, but each success drew more attention. The alien commander was learning, adapting, narrowing the unknown. The moment would come when patience wasn't enough, when they would have to decide between disappearing entirely or striking so hard the enemy's momentum shattered. The evening brought no reprieve. Through the scope, Kane watched the commander inspecting the black-armored hunters' bodies. The alien's posture was rigid, controlled, but his movements were sharper now, less certain. He barked orders, and heavy weapons began moving toward the northern approach. Artillery platforms, sleek, angular machines, were positioned to target the hillsides. "They're going to flush us," Vance said. Kane adjusted his rifle, sighting along the edge of the basin. Not if we bleed them first. They shifted position again, this time to a rise overlooking the artillery. The crews moved methodically, locking stabilizers into the mud. Kane picked the one giving orders, waited for the brief stillness between gestures, and fired. The shot dropped the alien instantly, and chaos followed. Crews scrambled for cover, leaving equipment half-assembled. Vance picked off another operator trying to bring a cannon online. Within minutes, the artillery was abandoned, drones swarming the area in frantic search patterns. By nightfall, the basin had the feel of a hive struck too many times, organized but humming with agitation. Kane and Vance withdrew to higher ground, their path concealed by the return of thick fog. They set up in silence, the ridge wind carrying the distant sounds of alien shouts and machinery. Vance broke the quiet first. You ever think about after? Kane didn't look away from the valley. After what? All this. The fighting. The hiding. He considered it. There's no after until they're gone. And they don't leave. The fog thickened, curling around them like a living thing. Somewhere below, the alien commander paced the edge of the basin, looking up at the dark hills. Kane watched him through the mist, the distance between them feeling smaller than it was. This was the shape of their war. Not armies clashing in open fields, but two minds locked across the gulf of terrain and silence. One would break. The other would remain unseen. The storm returned in the small hours, a violent curtain of rain that hammered the ridges and turned the valley floor into a mire of slick clay. Lightning flared along the horizon, casting the alien fortifications in fleeting white silhouettes. Kane lay beneath the overhang, every sense tuned to the change in the air. The basin was louder tonight, machines shifting, orders shouted in clipped bursts, the low drone of heavy engines warming for sustained operation. The enemy was preparing to move in force. Vance sat cross-legged beside her slate, the glow muted beneath a tarp. Movement on all fronts, she said, scanning data as it streamed from her sensors. They've shifted half their southern perimeter north. Looks like they're massing for a sweep. Kane studied the darkness below, watching the subtle changes in light as units repositioned. How many? 3 full companies minimum, plus drone support. She hesitated before adding, if they close the circle, we'll be trapped in the valley. He shifted his rifle into position, sighting through the rain-smeared scope. Then we don't let them close it. The alien commander emerged from the command hub, armored in fresh crimson-plated gear that gleamed under the floodlights. His posture radiated resolve, but his movements were quick and sharp. A man, or something like one, who had decided patience was no longer worth the cost. Around him, squads formed into staggered columns, each flanked by drones whose lights cut through the rain like spears. They're coming to end it, Vance said. Kane nodded. So are we. They moved quickly, keeping low, angling along the ridgeline until they reached a narrow saddle between 2 peaks. The terrain here was deceptive, flat at first glance, but riddled with depressions and jagged rock that created natural choke points. Kane had walked it twice in darkness, memorizing every line and shadow. In the rain, it became even more treacherous. This is where we hold them, he said, setting his pack down and pulling out extra magazines. Vance mirrored him without question, her face a mask of concentration. The first alien scouts crested the lower slope 20 minutes later, their armor glistening under the lights of their drones. Kane waited, breath slow, heartbeat steady. When a lead soldier stepped into the open, Kane's rifle bucked once. The alien folded silently into the mud. Vance's shot came a half-second later, dropping the second before the squad could react. Shouts rose, plasma bolts slashing through the rain. Kane and Vance shifted, moving between firing points, never staying exposed for more than a heartbeat. The aliens pushed forward, each step met with precise, punishing fire. Lightning split the sky, and for an instant, Kane saw the commander at the rear, directing his forces up the slope. The image burned in his mind, the target, the fulcrum on which this battle could turn. But the distance was too great for a clean shot, and too many bodies moved between them. The alien advance slowed as the choke points claimed their toll. Kane used the terrain to force them into narrow lines, where each shot counted double. Vance covered the flanks, her fire methodical and unerring. Drones darted overhead, their search beams flashing across the rocks, but the ghillie suits and the rain swallowed Kane and Vance into the earth. Explosions bloomed along the ridge as alien mortars began to pound the hillside. Shards of stone clattered against Kane's helmet, one fragment cutting a line across his cheek. He ignored the sting, reloading with practice speed. "They're pushing right," Vance called, shifting to intercept. Her shot dropped another soldier mid-charge. "We can't hold forever." "Don't need forever," Kane said. Another wave surged up the slope, their movements more desperate now, the commander's voice cutting through the chaos in guttural bursts. Kane focused on the ones who moved fastest, the ones carrying heavier weapons. One by one, they fell, their advance stalling against the invisible line the snipers had drawn. A plasma bolt struck close, the heat washing over Kane's arm. He rolled, sighted, and returned fire, the target crumpling into the mud. His breathing was heavier now, each shot taken with deliberate care. Through the haze of rain and smoke, he saw movement, a gap in the alien formation. The commander was stepping forward, flanked by two guards, his gaze fixed on the ridgeline. Kane shifted, aligning his sights. The wind gusted, rain striking sideways. He adjusted for the drift, finger tightening on the trigger. The shot cracked through the storm. One of the guards fell instantly. The other lunged toward the commander, pushing him down. The round meant for the alien leader tore through the guard's armor, dropping him where he stood. The commander vanished into the chaos, retreating behind a wall of soldiers. Kane swore under his breath, but kept firing, each round slowing the alien retreat. The push had faltered. Below, the basin was a scene of disarray. Drones circling without coordination, squads breaking formation to pull back their wounded. The commander's voice still rang out, but it no longer carried the same command. There was urgency now, almost desperation. "They're falling back," Vance said, disbelief threading her voice. Kane lowered his rifle slightly, scanning the retreat. "Not far enough. They'll regroup." He watched as the alien forces withdrew to the edge of the basin, dragging equipment and leaving behind scorched ground and silent bodies. The rain washed over everything, muting the battlefield into shades of gray. When the last drone vanished into the mist, Kane and Vance stayed prone, waiting. The valley felt different now. Not safe, never safe, but lighter somehow, as though the weight pressing down had shifted. "You think that was it?" Vance asked finally. Kane shook his head. "That was a warning. For them, and for us." They moved only when the light began to fade, slipping back into the deeper ridges where even the drone's beams couldn't reach. Kane's mind replayed the moment when the commander had been in his sights, the near miss that could have ended it all. That image would stay with him, sharpening into resolve. They reached their fallback position, a shallow cave concealed by a curtain of vines. Inside, the air was still, the damp walls smelling of stone and moss. Vance set her rifle down carefully, leaning back against the wall. "We held," she said. "For now," Kane replied, checking the action on his rifle. He worked in silence for a moment before adding, "Next time we finish it." Outside, the storm eased, the rain thinning to a steady whisper. Somewhere beyond the hills, the alien commander was planning his next move, just as Kane was planning his. The war was far from over, but in the valley tonight, the ghosts in the mud had won.